I'm Jared with Global City Mission, and Global City Mission is a missions organization. However, we do a lot of training. But if I'm to be honest, the training is stuff that we do is kind of a means to an end. We enjoy doing it. It's great, but what we're really after is mobilizing followers of Christ to live on mission and to engage other people in healthy evangelistic conversations that represent Jesus well. Um, and so when we do evangelism training, we do that for churches. We also have an online platform for training with individuals. And so we go in and we do the training at a particular church. There's a couple of key, really foundational principles, a couple of metaphors we use that get at the principles that help shape the conversations we're having. And one of those metaphors is just drawing from the parable of the sower or the parable of the four soils that Jesus tells. And so, if you remember that parable, the farmer is casting all these seeds, and it's falling on all different kinds of ground. It's rocky and shallow, and birds are eating up the seed, and it's in thorns and roots not going down deep. But then there's this kind of soil that is fertile and good, and so it takes the seed and it grows into something that multiplies and has a wider impact on the world. And so I think Jesus tells parables like that because it's more than two-dimensional, right? I mean, he's telling these stories that can have layers of meaning to them. But for our purposes, we're talking about training for healthy evangelistic conversations. There's really two key principles that we draw out of that parable. And the first one is that any way you look at it, we need to be scattering lots of seeds, and so this is the good news of the kingdom of God, right? So the parable says the seed is, and so this is scattering lots of seeds and lots of different people that get to hear and get to experience the good news of the kingdom, the gospel of Christ, and so scattering lots of seeds. That's the first principle, and I've really seen this in my life. I mean, in terms of actual physical seeds, like I moved from the Bronx, New York City, to Tampa, Florida, and we got a house with a backyard, and it's warm weather, and we started planting like crazy. I'm planting in pots. I'm planting a little garden bed, little garden box. I'm planting fruit trees, and when we plant things from seed, not all the seeds grow. We plant some seeds, and not all of them come up. And in the parable, Jesus is really focused on the soil. That the seed is all the same seed in the story. It's quality seed. It's the good news of the kingdom, but it depends on the receptivity, the fertileness of the soil, to receive the seed and to do something with it. And so I think that's one of the principles is we want to sow generously, just like this farmer does. He sows almost recklessly, so throwing the seed everywhere. We want to cast lots of seeds of the kingdom, and so seeds of the gospel. And so that's one principle I think you draw out of that parable. Another principle that we also draw out of that parable, looking at how not every soil was receptive. Not every soil received the seed. And really the farmer had no control over that. I mean, the soil was the soil. And so another principle that we draw out of this is that we need to seek receptivity rather than trying to win a debate. Sometimes when we make our evangelistic engagement or evangelistic conversations trying to win a debate, trying to win the argument, I can't help but feel like we might care more about winning the argument or being right than we do about winning the person. And so we need to look at people's receptivity to engage. I'm not even talking about receptivity to conversion right now or to become a Jesus follower right away, but for receptivity to engage the conversation. That's where we invest ourselves. We find those people that are receptive to engage the conversation, and that's where we invest our time. That's where we invest energy. That's where we learn to listen well to their story and their journey, and where we continue to cast the seeds of the gospel as we engage people. So a couple of key principles coming out of the parable of the sower. One is let's scatter lots of seed of the gospel. And the second is let's move away from the idea of trying to win the argument, win the debate. Instead, let's seek out people that are receptive to engage the conversation. Um, Another metaphor that we use is the idea of creating a mosaic, that our evangelistic conversations are like an artist making a mosaic. If you remember in your art history, a mosaic was created from putting down lots of pieces of tile or glass, And as the artist put more and more of these pieces of tile down, the picture becomes clearer and clearer of what they're creating. And so we really want to suggest that evangelistic dialogue is like this. The building an evangelistic friendship is like this, where each conversation with someone, we're laying down a few more tiles, and another conversation's a few more tiles, and then a few more tiles. And as the picture becomes clearer and clearer, as we lay down more and more tiles, we have more and more conversations about the gospel of Christ. The picture becomes clearer, and people begin to get a really whole sense and a clear vision of what the gospel is and the implications for their life. And so we're kind of assuming here that we're on the same page, that what we're talking about is discipling people to walk with Jesus and become his disciples, his followers. And if we're honest with ourselves, we know that's really a series of conversations and encounters and relationships and experiences that generally lead someone to become a follower of Christ. And those instances where we do meet somebody and they're ready right away, and it all happens in one conversation, and they really do become a committed disciple of Christ, that's usually because there was 10 other people before us, and we're reaping where someone else has sown. If we're really honest, we know that's true, because most of us, there's always exceptions to everything, but most of us, it's a whole series of experiences, encounters, relationships, conversations that lead us to Christ. So when we begin entering into these evangelistic friendships and these spiritual dialogues with people, it's a series of conversations and a series of encounters, and it's loving them with our life, from person, just life on life, person to person. And each conversation, we're laying down a few more tiles. Each conversation, we're laying down a few more tiles. And one of the questions that comes up is, where do you start? In other words, what are the first tiles that you really lay down as you engage with people? And my answer is, I don't care. I don't care. I mean, I care, but I don't care. You know what I mean? It's more a matter of it's the principle is it's starting where people are, not where we want them to be. And how often do our kind of prepared presentations, our memorized scripts that we have, how often is that assuming where someone is, or judging their receptivity on how they respond to that particular presentation? But maybe they'd actually be open to a conversation. And so what we need to do is engage people where they are, not where we want them to be. And so each conversation is laying down a few more tiles and a few more tiles. And we begin with whatever faith conversation they're ready to have. That's where we start. It might be something about creation, or maybe the central message of cross and resurrection and salvation. It might be a parable Jesus told. It might be something David did. Just start wherever they are. That's the principle. And we've seen this happen over and over again, where we share the image of the mosaic with people as a metaphor for evangelistic relationships. And we find that it frees people to increase their evangelistic engagement, because what has happened is people have come to believe that, believers, followers of Jesus, have come to believe that they have to have that one conversation where they get all the main points in there, and they close the deal in a single conversation, and that's what equals sharing the gospel. And yeah, that can be sharing the gospel, but we want to say that the gospel, entering into sharing the gospel, is walking with people in relationship and conversation. And for many people, it's going to take more than one conversation, especially in our emerging, increasing post-religious context here in North America. It's going to be multiple conversations, and and each time we engage with someone, it's laying down a few more tiles. And as we engage with them, as we share with them, starting wherever they're at and building on that, with more conversation and sharing a little bit more as we live life on life with people, and sharing good news. And they get a clearer and clearer picture of the gospel and what the implications of their life would be, if they embrace it. And so one key principle that kind of encapsulate all of this is that if we're going to do things for Jesus, we also need to do our very, very best. We're not perfect, but our very, very best to do things like Jesus. And that's an important principle to live by.